You know what's whispered in secret among women after 60? Maybe we're just too picky. And today, I'm here, with a cup of tea and the universe chuckling in the background, to say, no. We're not too picky. We're just finally sober. Welcome, dear ones, to Buddhist Wisdom for the Elderly, where today we peel back the sweet-smelling nonsense and look truth in the slightly wrinkled, passive-aggressive face. Because after 60, patience isn't a virtue anymore. It's a liability. Stay with me, because those tiny phrases men toss out, they're not harmless. They're tiny spiritual landmines, and you've been stepping on them in your best shoes. For each part, we'll give you the phrase, why it stings like a mosquito with an MBA, a real story so you can laugh and sigh, and what you can lovingly say back, preferably without serving 20 years for assault. And whatever you do, don't miss part 4. You're not enough for me. Because realizing you were always more than enough might just save you a decade of spiritual babysitting. Like, subscribe, and help us reach 1,000 souls so we can keep building a monastery of wisdom and occasional righteous sarcasm for the elderly. Now, tighten your spiritual seatbelt. The stray cats are coming. Let's begin. Part 1. You have to accept me as I am. The spiritual gaslighter. You have to accept me as I am. Sounds noble, right? Sounds like the kind of thing the Buddha might have whispered under a Bodhi tree, right? Wrong. Usually, when a man says this after 60, he's not offering you enlightened self-awareness. He's offering you emotional leftovers and asking you to eat them with a grateful smile. Let's be honest. There's a big difference between authentic vulnerability and lazy stubbornness dressed up like wisdom. True authenticity sounds like, here's where I am and I'm working on it. Fake authenticity sounds like, here's my mess. Love it or leave it. But preferably love it so I don't have to do anything. Now, let's pause for a quick Buddhist lesson here. The Buddha taught anicca, impermanence, that everything, even your worst habits, is fluid, changing, evolving. There's no final product human being unless you're already a taxidermy exhibit. So when someone demands you accept them as they are, what they really mean is, I have no plans to grow. Please lower your standards accordingly. Margaret was 68 when she met a man named Paul at her community meditation group. He wore linen pants, quoted Rumi, and knew just enough about the chakras to sound suspiciously rehearsed. At first, it was charming. Margaret admired his authenticity, his tales of living in the moment, even if the moment sometimes involved ignoring his unpaid taxes, skipping therapy, and leaving emotional landmines wherever he walked. Whenever Margaret tried to talk about something uncomfortable, like how he dismissed her boundaries with a joke, he'd tilt his head like a sad dog and say, you just have to accept me as I am. I'm a free spirit. 3 years later, Margaret wasn't living with a free spirit. She was living with a man who couldn't pick up his socks or his own accountability off the floor. By the time she packed his linen pants into a charity box, she realized she had accepted him so fully that she forgot to accept herself. True acceptance isn't loving someone's refusal to grow. True acceptance is seeing someone's potential and watching them walk toward it, even if they stumble, even if they're slow. If he's not walking, he's not growing. If he's not growing, you're not sharing your life, you're babysitting it. You're not here to carry a man across the river of his own laziness. You're here to walk beside someone who's paddling his own boat, even if he's sometimes a little crooked. The Buddha didn't sit under the Bodhi tree and say, I'm fine the way I am. No, he sat because he knew there was more. More understanding, more self-honesty, more freedom, and so should you. Next time a man says, you have to accept me as I am, you have my full permission to smile kindly, lean in close, and whisper, sweetheart, even the mountain erodes. What makes you think you're exempt? And then, leave before the landslide starts. Because you are not here to be anyone's unpaid emotional Sherpa. You are here to live, breathe, laugh, and if you're lucky, find someone who knows that acceptance is just the beginning, not the end. Part 2. All my exes were crazy. The professional victim. The ancient mating call of the emotionally immature man. All my exes were crazy. He says it so casually, like he's ordering coffee. Yeah, I'll take a tall latte, no foam. And by the way, everyone I ever loved was a psychopath. Listen, If a man past 60 tells you every woman he's dated, loved, married, or met in a Walmart parking lot turned out to be crazy, you're not talking to a survivor. You're talking to a common denominator. Because here's the truth, no one wants to print on a Hallmark card. If every house you move into is haunted, maybe it's not the house. Maybe you're the one dragging the ghosts around in a dirty suitcase labeled, "Not my fault." Gloria, at the bright young age of 70, met Roger at a ballroom dancing class. Roger was charming in that used car salesman, but with fancier cologne kind of way. First date? Amazing. Second date? Even better. Third date? My ex-wife? Oh, she was insane. Totally obsessed, had to block her. Then came the ex-girlfriend. Total nutcase. Keyed my car once because I didn't text back fast enough. Then his daughter-in-law. Borderline psychotic, paranoid. You can't trust women these days. By date 5, Gloria realized she wasn't dating Roger. She was auditioning for the role of next crazy woman. Because here's the Buddhist catch. The mind projects outward what it refuses to clean up inward. Buddha taught about the second arrow. The first arrow is the pain life throws at you. The second arrow is the story you tell yourself afterward. The grudge, the blame, the endless reruns of why me. Men who paint all their exes as monsters are still clutching a quiver full of second arrows. And guess what? They're looking for someone new to aim at. Here's a real-life tip. A man who calls all his exes crazy isn't warning you about them. He's warning you about himself, about his inability to reflect, to own his half of the dance. Because in every relationship, even the doomed ones, it takes two. Two miscommunications. Two wounded inner children. Two sets of blind spots colliding like bumper cars at a county fair. When someone skips right over their own shadow and starts pointing fingers like a gospel preacher, you can bet your last piece of dark chocolate that the real villain isn't just out there. So the next time a man leans across the table, gives you those misty eyes and says, "You're nothing like my crazy exes," you smile, you take a slow sip of your tea, and you say, "No, darling, I'm much worse. I'm awake." And then you let him figure out which ghost he needs to wrestle with, because it's not going to be you. Not now. Not ever again. Part 3. If you really loved me, you'd. The emotional pickpocket. Ah yes, the phrase that has sunk more relationships than infidelity, politics, and bad breath combined. If you really loved me, you'd. Fill in the blank. Move to another city. Give up your friends. Sell your favorite armchair. Sacrifice your sanity on the altar of his fragile ego. This little sentence doesn't arrive with a sword. It comes wrapped in a red velvet ribbon, smelling suspiciously like devotion. But don't be fooled. Underneath all that sweetness is an emotional crowbar, prying open your boundaries, one guilty concession at a time. Susan, vibrant at 67, met a man who seemed, at first, like he had fallen straight from the pages of a romance novel. He called her his angel. He said she was the best thing that ever happened to him. He said, "If you really loved me, you'd sell your house and move closer to me." At first, it sounded reasonable. After all, love requires sacrifice, right? Wrong. That's what emotional pickpockets want you to believe. That stealing your dreams is a small price to pay for togetherness. Susan nearly did it. Nearly gave up her home, her garden, her memories, for a man who couldn't even show up to therapy on time. One night, sitting alone in her kitchen, she realized if she had to prove her love by losing herself, she wasn't in love. She was in emotional debt. In Buddhist teachings, there's a word for this craving to possess, to control. Upadana. Clinging. It's the desperate need to grab at others, to pull them in like lifeboats for our own sinking sense of worth. And here's the kicker. True love, real, messy, beautiful, mature love, doesn't cling. It doesn't guilt you. It doesn't keep score. It trusts, it listens, it holds space without pulling the floor out from under you. A man who says, "If you really loved me, you'd," isn't measuring love. He's measuring how much of yourself he can carve away without a fight. And darling, you didn't spend 60+ years on this earth just to be whittled down into someone else's keychain. So the next time someone says, "If you really loved me, you'd do what I ask," smile sweetly, channel your inner Zen master, and reply, "If you really loved yourself, you wouldn't need a hostage." And then go home, light a candle, and love yourself so fiercely that no emotional pickpocket would even dare approach without a permission slip from the Buddha himself. Because here's the truth. You don't owe anyone your peace. Not for love, not for loyalty, not for loneliness. Love that demands you shrink isn't love. It's a cleverly disguised ransom note. And you, my friend, are nobody's hostage. Part 4. You're not enough for me. The walking black hole. There's a special kind of man you meet after 60. He doesn't show up wearing a red flag like a cape. Oh no, he shows up carrying a bottomless pit, disguised as a heart. And at some point, if you stick around long enough, you'll hear him say the magic words, "You're not enough for me." It won't sound cruel at first. Maybe it'll sound wistful, maybe even poetic. But listen carefully, because what he's actually saying is, no matter what you do, you'll never fill the hole where I lost myself. And if you try, congratulations, you just signed up for a lifetime subscription to emotional bankruptcy. Helen was 70, smart, funny, with a silver streak in her hair that made her look like wisdom itself had kissed her forehead. She met Bill. Bill was charming. Bill loved her at first, but soon came the comments. "You're great, but I just wish you were a little more adventurous. I love you, but sometimes I feel like something's missing. You're wonderful, but maybe you don't really get me." Helen tried everything. Took cooking classes, learned about hiking, even though she hated bugs, read the existential novels he liked, the ones where everyone dies sad and French. Nothing worked. Because Helen wasn't dealing with a man who needed a better match. She was dealing with a man who needed a mirror and couldn't stand the sight of his own emptiness. In Buddhism, there's a tragic character called the Preta, the hungry ghost, a being with a huge bloated stomach and a tiny shriveled throat, always starving, never satisfied. People who carry that "you're not enough" energy, they're walking hungry ghosts. Not because you're lacking, but because they're incapable of being fed. You could turn yourself into a 7-course Michelin-starred emotional buffet, and he would still leave hungry. Still blaming you. Because his real hunger isn't for your love, it's for his own missing self-worth. And no human being, not even a living saint with a PhD in compassion, can spoon-feed someone the wholeness they refuse to build inside themselves. So the next time you hear, "You're not enough for me," take a deep breath. Smile like a wise old cat who's seen too many mice playing victim. And whisper, lovingly, of course, "Good. I'm not here to fill black holes. I'm here to dance under stars." Then turn around and walk away, leaving him to feast on his own emptiness like a sad little ghost at an all-you-can't-eat buffet. Because here's the unvarnished Buddhist truth. You are already whole, already enough, already free. Anyone who tells you otherwise is just looking for someone else to blame for the storm inside their own chest. And you, my dear, are no longer offering yourself up as a human umbrella. Part 5. Do whatever you want. The passive-aggressive Zen master of misery. Few phrases are as deceptively toxic, yet so elegantly delivered as this one. Do whatever you want, said with just the right sprinkle of disdain, a twist of guilt, and a passive-aggressive smile that could curdle fresh milk. It's not permission. It's not understanding. It's a booby-trapped gift box rigged to explode the second you touch it. Because here's the real translation: I don't actually respect your decision. I'm just setting the stage for the guilt parade that's about to roll through your heart. Lydia, a fierce and fabulous 72-year-old, was dating a man named Dennis. Dennis was the king of fake Zen. Whenever Lydia wanted to visit her grandkids, join a book club, or heavens forbid, take a solo weekend trip, Dennis would sigh dramatically, look out the window like a sad poet, and murmur, "Do whatever you want." Lydia, thinking she was free to live her life, would make her plans, only to find herself days later on the receiving end of long, guilt-soaked monologues about abandonment, loyalty, and the meaning of true partnership. By month 6, Lydia realized something. She wasn't dating a man. She was dating an emotional booby trap in khakis. In Buddhism, there's a principle called right speech, speaking truthfully, kindly, and clearly. Passive-aggressive, do whatever you want, is the opposite of right speech. It's an emotional riddle, wrapped in a guilt bomb, designed to make you decode feelings he refuses to express. The Buddha would have looked at Dennis and said, very kindly of course, "My son, either say it plainly, or please go meditate until you remember how." Because here's the deal. Grown men, especially after 60, should not be communicating like angsty teenagers auditioning for a sad indie film. True connection requires clarity. True love doesn't speak in riddles. It doesn't require you to read emotional braille every time you make a decision. Freedom in love is when two people say what they mean and trust each other enough to hear it. Anything less is a prison made of silence and sighs. So the next time you hear, "Do whatever you want," pause, smile, channel your inner bodhisattva of sarcasm, and gently reply, "Thanks for the permission slip, Zen Master. I was planning to do that anyway." Then go do exactly what you want, without guilt, without drama, and without dragging a single ounce of emotional confusion along with you. Because you didn't survive your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond just to start playing charades with someone else's insecurities. You are not here to decode emotional riddles. You are here to live freely, love clearly, and leave any conversation that smells like a trap before it starts leaking toxic fumes into your joy. In the immortal words of Ram Dass, if you were feeling a little spicy, be here now. And if here feels like a guilt trap, be somewhere else immediately. Part 6, I'm just being honest, the weaponized truth teller. There's a certain kind of man, and you usually meet him when you least expect it, who believes that rudeness, cruelty, and unsolicited advice are actually acts of spiritual enlightenment. He looks you dead in the eye, shrugs innocently, and says, "Hey, I'm just being honest." As if emotional maturity is measured by how many people you can slap in the soul before lunch. Spoiler, it's not. Real honesty is clear, kind, courageous. Weaponized honesty, that's just ego in a tuxedo. Beverly, a spry and sarcastic 69-year-old, started seeing a man named Frank. Frank was a truth teller, or so he claimed. Their first date, he said, "You look good for your age. I mean, considering, you know." Second date, "You're sweet, but you could stand to lose a few pounds if you want to keep a man." Third date, "You're great, but you really need to work on being less emotional." Each time Beverly flinched, Frank would grin and say, "Hey, I'm just being honest. Don't shoot the messenger." By the fourth date, Beverly decided Frank could take his messages and shove them somewhere only a very advanced yogi could retrieve. In Buddhist ethics, there's something called samavaka, right speech. Right speech means honesty tempered by compassion. It's not about vomiting every fleeting opinion that crosses your mind onto someone else's soul like a bad buffet. As one Zen teacher said, truth without kindness is just another form of violence. Men who weaponize honesty are not brave. They're scared. Scared to be vulnerable themselves, so they wield truth like a rusty sword, hacking away at others to avoid looking inside. Real strength isn't brutal honesty. It's tender honesty. It's saying the hard thing with a soft heart. Or sometimes not saying it at all because the silence itself can be medicine. So the next time someone leans back, smirks, and says, "I'm just being honest," smile. Channel your inner mischievous monk and say, "Thank you, and I'm just being merciful by leaving you with your opinions." Then gather your dignity like a silk robe around you and exit, stage left, leaving him alone with his award for Most Spiritually Unaware Man 2025. Because real wisdom knows, just because something is true doesn't mean it needs to be said. Especially if it's only being said to make someone else feel small. You are not here to shrink under the weight of someone else's honesty. You are here to expand, to laugh, to breathe easier, even if it means breathing far away from whoever thinks cruelty is a virtue. In the end, it's simple. If it isn't kind, isn't helpful, and isn't yours to fix, maybe it's not truth. Maybe it's just noise. And you, my friend, have far better songs to listen to. Part 7. I guess I'm just not good enough for you. The manipulative martyr. Oh, the manipulative martyr. That tragic figure who wraps himself in a cloak of wounded nobility and expects you to bow at the altar of his self-pity. At some point, when you're not bending, shrinking, or apologizing fast enough, he'll sigh dramatically, look into the middle distance like a C-grade Shakespearean actor, and say, "I guess I'm just not good enough for you." Cue the sad violin. Cue the guilt trap setting itself like a bear trap wrapped in a love letter. Because what he's really saying is, please abandon your boundaries and come rescue me from the feelings I refuse to rescue myself from. Patricia, a brilliant 71-year-old artist who could paint sunsets that made grown men weep, once dated a man named Ted. Ted specialized in self-pity couture. He wore victimhood like a bespoke suit. Whenever Patricia had a boundary, like asking for a night to herself to work on her art, Ted would spiral into self-deprecating despair. I guess I'm not exciting enough for you. When she refused to cancel a long-planned trip with her sister, I guess you have better things to do than be with me. At first, Patricia felt bad. She started canceling plans, erasing parts of her life, twisting herself into smaller and smaller shapes, trying to prove he was enough. Until one day, standing in front of one of her half-finished canvases, she realized the only person she wasn't enough for was herself. And she decided to stop playing nursemaid to a grown man's wounded pride. Buddhist teaching reminds us, attachment to identity, especially the identity of victim, is a form of craving. It's a sneaky craving too, because it looks like humility on the outside, but inside, it's just another hunger. Hunger for validation, hunger for control, hunger for someone else to fix the hole in the soul. When a man weaponizes self-pity, he's not showing vulnerability. He's trading you guilt for control. And once you buy that trade, you'll find yourself paying for his emotional maintenance indefinitely, like a subscription service you forgot to cancel. But here's the Buddhist punchline. You cannot pour enough love into a cracked vessel that refuses to be mended. So the next time someone sighs and says, I guess I'm just not good enough for you, I want you to pause, breathe, and, if you're feeling extra merciful, offer a smile so radiant it could trigger a spontaneous ego death. And say, well, thank goodness you're self-aware. Good luck on your journey. And then walk away like the enlightened badass you are, leaving him to hold his own empty cup under the sky, where maybe, just maybe, he'll realize the rain he's been waiting for was always supposed to come from inside himself. Because you're not here to shrink your life down into someone else's sad little story. You are the author of your own liberation. You are the main character, the plot twist, and the happy ending. And no man's soggy guilt trip gets to rewrite your script. Not anymore. And there you have it. 7 little phrases, soft on the ears, deadly on the soul. Today, you didn't just dodge emotional bullets. You learned how to catch them mid-air, bow to them like an old Zen master, and set them gently back down, without losing your peace, your dignity, or your good china. You learned that accept me as I am sometimes means please babysit my laziness. That all my exes were crazy usually means, and guess who's next? And that guilt tripping isn't love. It's just manipulation dressed up like a Hallmark card that smells faintly of desperation. Most importantly, you remembered something your soul has known since the beginning. You are already enough. You are not here to shrink, explain, or apologize for your light. You are here to sip your tea, tend your garden, and maybe, if the stars are feeling frisky, laugh yourself awake. If you found even one phrase today that made you laugh, sigh, or quietly close a mental door on someone, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to Buddhist Wisdom for the Elderly, and drop a comment telling me which phrase you're officially retiring from your life. Let's keep growing this wild, wise little sangha, one cosmic joke at a time. I'll see you in the next one, my friends. Stay free, stay fierce, stay funny.